INFJs in leadership, why they succeed secretly. When people think of leaders, they imagine confidence that fills a room. They think of bold voices, quick decisions, visible authority. They picture someone who commands attention the moment they walk in. INFJs rarely match that image. They're often quieter, more observant, more reflective than commanding. And yet, quietly, INFJs lead some of the most impactful teams, movements, and transformations in the world. Not by dominating, not by demanding, but by understanding. INFJs succeed in leadership not because they seek power, but because they understand people, systems, and meaning at a depth most leaders never reach. Today, we're exploring why INFJs succeed in leadership, secretly, often without recognition, applause, or visibility. If you're an INFJ, this video may finally explain why leadership feels natural to you, even when it feels uncomfortable. And if you work with an INFJ, or are led by one, this may help you recognize a form of leadership that rarely announces itself, but quietly shapes everything around it. Leadership is often misunderstood. Leadership is commonly confused with authority, with control, with being the loudest voice in the room. We reward leaders who move fast, who speak confidently, who appear decisive, even when they're not. But true leadership isn't about command. It's about direction, about influence, about guiding people towards something better, often without forcing them. And this is where INFJs quietly excel. Because INFJs don't lead from ego. They lead from insight. They don't ask, how do I stand out? They ask, what do people need in order to move forward? And that single question changes everything. 1. INFJs lead with vision, not control. At the core of INFJ leadership is vision. INFJs are future-oriented thinkers. They naturally see patterns unfolding over time. They don't just react to problems. They sense where things are heading long before others do. This means INFJ leaders often anticipate challenges early, recognize misalignment before it becomes visible, sense when a direction is unsustainable, understand the deeper purpose behind goals. They don't need to control every step. Instead, they hold a clear internal picture of why something matters and where it should go. This allows them to lead without micromanaging. People may not always understand an INFJ's decisions at first, but over time, they begin to trust them. Because INFJs are rarely impulsive, and rarely careless about direction. Their leadership isn't reactive, it's intentional. 2. INFJs understand people on a deep psychological level. One of the greatest, and least recognized, INFJ leadership strengths is psychological insight. INFJs don't just see roles. They see motivations. They instinctively notice what energizes people, what discourages them, what they're afraid to say out loud, what makes them shut down, what makes them feel safe enough to grow. This allows INFJs to lead individuals, not just groups. They don't apply one leadership style to everyone. They adapt intuitively. They know when to challenge someone, and when to protect them. They sense when feedback needs to be direct, and when it needs to be gentle. This isn't manipulation. It's attunement. And people feel it, even if they can't articulate why they trust the INFJ leader. 3. INFJs create psychological safety. Many leaders rely on fear to maintain control. INFJs don't. They create loyalty through psychological safety. People don't follow INFJs because they're forced to. They follow because they feel understood. INFJ leaders tend to listen deeply, respect emotional boundaries, invite input rather than silence it, give feedback thoughtfully, correct without humiliation. This creates environments where people feel safe to think, speak, and contribute honestly. And psychologically safe environments outperform fear-based ones, every time. People take creative risks. They communicate problems earlier. They collaborate instead of compete. INFJs may never demand loyalty, but they earn it quietly. 4. INFJs lead ethically, even when it costs them. INFJs carry a strong internal moral compass. In leadership, this shows up as integrity. They struggle deeply with exploiting people, compromising values, treating humans like resources, making decisions that feel emotionally or ethically wrong. Leadership often involves pressure. Pressure to prioritize efficiency over humanity. Pressure to sacrifice people for results. INFJs resist that pressure. They would rather lose approval than betray values. Slow progress than harm people. Walk away than lead dishonestly. This moral endurance is rare. And while it isn't always rewarded in the short term, it builds long-term trust, credibility, and respect. INFJ leaders don't just ask, "Will this work?" They ask, "Is this right?" 5. INFJs influence quietly, but powerfully. INFJs rarely assert dominance. Instead, they influence through presence. They don't overpower conversations. They shape them. They tend to ask questions that shift perspective, reframe problems calmly, introduce ideas thoughtfully, let others reach conclusions themselves. This creates buy-in rather than resistance. People feel ownership over decisions, even when the INFJ subtly guided the process. This is invisible leadership, and it's incredibly effective. INFJs don't need credit. They need alignment. 6. INFJs see the whole system, not just the outcome. INFJs think systemically. They don't isolate problems. They zoom out. They consider culture, emotional climate, long-term consequences, unintended ripple effects, human cost. This is why INFJs sometimes appear slow or cautious. But it's not hesitation. It's responsibility. They ask, "What happens after this decision? Who will this affect long-term? What patterns are we reinforcing? What are we sacrificing without realizing it?" This depth protects organizations from short-sighted decisions, even if it frustrates faster-moving personalities. 7. INFJs are natural servant leaders. INFJs don't lead to elevate themselves. They lead to serve a vision. They ask, "How can I remove obstacles? How can I support growth? How can I protect what matters?" They often place themselves behind the team, shielding others from pressure while quietly carrying it themselves. This doesn't look like leadership in traditional hierarchies, but it creates deep respect. People sense when a leader genuinely cares about their well-being, not just their output. And INFJs care deeply. 8. INFJs lead best without the spotlight. Many INFJs struggle with visible authority, not because they lack confidence, but because constant attention drains them. They lead best when focus stays on the mission, recognition is shared, influence matters more than image, depth matters more than performance. This is why INFJs often thrive as strategic leaders, directors, advisors, counselors, visionaries behind the scenes. They don't need applause to lead effectively. They need meaning. 9. INFJs are often mistaken for not leader types. Because INFJs are quiet, they're often overlooked. They may be seen as too sensitive, too idealistic, too reserved, too slow. But these traits aren't weaknesses. They're leadership strengths in disguise. INFJs don't lead loudly. They lead accurately. And accuracy builds trust. 10. INFJs burn out in the wrong leadership culture. While INFJs can be exceptional leaders, they are not immune to burnout. They struggle when leadership becomes politically aggressive, ego-driven, emotionally exploitative, performance-focused without purpose. INFJs need environments that respect depth, ethics, emotional intelligence, long-term thinking. When forced into loud, competitive leadership cultures, INFJs may withdraw or self-doubt. But the problem isn't their ability, it's the environment. 11. INFJs carry invisible emotional labor. INFJ leaders often absorb emotional tension others avoid. They mediate conflict quietly, hold emotional complexity, support others behind the scenes, carry responsibility without recognition. This invisible labor keeps teams functioning, but often goes unnoticed until it's gone. 12. Why INFJ leadership is often recognized too late. INFJ leadership is frequently understood only in hindsight. People realize things felt calmer, communication was clearer, conflict was handled with care, purpose felt stronger. And only after the INFJ leaves does the contrast become obvious. INFJ leadership doesn't announce itself. It stabilizes. It aligns. It protects. Quietly. The truth about INFJ leadership. INFJs don't lead to be powerful. They lead because they care about direction, meaning, and people. Their leadership is not loud, but it is deep. Not aggressive, but intentional. Not flashy, but enduring. And in a world exhausted by ego-driven leadership, INFJs represent something rare. Leadership rooted in understanding. If this video described a leadership style you've lived quietly, know this. You were never failing at leadership. You were simply practicing a form the world doesn't always recognize. If you want more psychology-based content that understands INFJ depth beyond stereotypes, consider subscribing. Because some leaders don't need to be loud to lead well.